Welcome to another episode of Clear Lake Connections, where we talk to the people behind the businesses of Bay Area, Houston, proudly sponsored by UTMB Health. Today, I have Doctors Dacso and Benate, and you are both with the National Laboratory and UTMB.
That's right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead and tell us what you do for the National Lab and at UTMB, and then we'll kind of get into, this is going to be an interesting episode because we're a podcast talking about a podcast, so...
Can the world get any more interesting? So I'm technically, I work with a lot of people in the National Lab, but I'm a clinician. I'm a general internist in the Department of Internal Medicine. I do primary care and hospital medicine, and then I also run our global health program. I'm the interim chair for our new Department of Global Health and Emerging Diseases in the School of Public and Population Health.
Yeah, I'm an associate professor in the microbiology and immunology department, and my laboratory is in the Galveston National Lab. And my laboratory, my team studies viruses that are transmitted by ticks, very severe, or viruses that cause very severe diseases, and they have to be studied in maximum biocontainment, so in the highest level, what we call BSL-4 lab.
It's funny you bring up ticks. So when I was in college, I got a tick, and my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, I freaked out because I'd heard about Lyme's disease, and she thought I was making that up. And so I've always, anytime somebody says tick, it shocks me into that story. Can you tell us a little bit about how these things are? I mean, I always found it fascinating because it's, you know, we all have pets, we love our dogs. Talk about a little bit about the dangers of what these things can bring into the house.
Yeah, so ticks feed on a range of different animals, and obviously they feed on humans too. And so they take multiple blood meals throughout their life, and during those blood meals they can pick up pathogens, they can pick up bacteria, viruses, even parasites. And when they pick it up from one host, they can transmit it to the next host. So, you know, if a tick feeds on maybe a wildlife or a wild animal, and then the next time it feeds on a dog or a human, then it can transmit that pathogen from the wild animal to the dog, to your dog, or to you. And so they can carry quite a large number of diseases. Many of those diseases we don't have any treatment for. There's no vaccine or no antibiotics work for some of them. But for the viral diseases that are transmitted by ticks, there's no treatment. And often they cause very severe symptoms and signs, and very severe disease in general.
Wow. I'm going to have to talk to my wife when I get home and tell her, hey, the tick stuff, I told you, it could have been bad.
Well, and it's interesting because I did my residency up in Rhode Island. And up in Rhode Island, there's huge number of ticks. Lyme disease was named from the city in Connecticut where it was really identified, which is Lyme, Connecticut.
Huh.
So it's really close to Rhode Island. So that part of the world is, famous for having very high tick populations. So for us, it's interesting because down here, like as a clinician, I don't see so much tick-related disease, but boy, up in Rhode Island, we saw Lyme disease, we saw babesiosis, we saw anaplasmosis, Ehrlichia, so all kinds of different diseases that you actually, even in our country, you have such a diversity of diseases that you may not see them in one region, but see them all over in another.
Well, I think there's a fair bit of irony here because one of the reasons you're on is you guys have started a podcast. Tell us about that, because I think we just found another episode for you just by accident, it seems.
I think it sounds good. Dennis, you want to start it off?
Sure, yeah. So we started a podcast recently. The title of the podcast is called the Infectious Science Podcast. And the origins of the name is because we feel like we want to trigger the interest in infectious diseases and obviously the work that we do, because I think we do some really great work at UTMB, the Galveston National Lab, and so we want to make science contagious and infectious, and so we want to make it spread from the listeners maybe to their friends and so on. So we started that recently. We just have a few episodes so far, but we're very excited, and we're trying to cover topics that fall under the umbrella what we call One Health. So Matt, do you want to talk a little bit about One Health? How does it apply to people in general?
Yeah, And so kind of taking off from where Dennis left off. So the One Health concept, I think you've done a podcast on that before. It's really this area that it's not a new area. It's been around for a long time, but it's about exploring the intersections between human health, animal health, and the environmental health. And really what got me into doing this with Dennis was not only that we've been working together for many years on various projects around the world, but I think during the COVID pandemic, we really, our world has been able to see disease in a very different way than it ever did before. And that's had some great effects. It's provided advancements in science and technology, but we faced a lot of challenges, especially with getting science out there, right? And how it was received by the public. So I think there was a part of us that felt like we're so interested and invested in science and infectious diseases and in seeing how these things relate to our everyday life that we wanted to share that with the public. And we wanted people out there, I think that there's a lot of stigma that comes with infectious diseases. And I think to whatever extent people can start to see these connections in our own lives, the connections that we have with animals, the connections that animals have with the environment. So when a new industrial lot is built, then there's effects that has on an environment that changes the habitats of animals, the behavior of animals, and then potentially puts them into more contact with us. These are not to be feared. These aren't to be stigmatized. These are parts of evolution and parts of the dynamics that we occupy, on the same planet together. So I think what we're really trying to do is bring some of that familiarity to the public to show them, hey, these are diseases. They're that can be transmitted among different animals. Maybe you're going to come into contact with them. Maybe you won't, but it is interesting, and it's something to be very, I think, excited about and interested in. So.
Well, you guys are the perfect example of this whole One Health concept, right? You've got an internist, and you have a veterinary background, and so you're definitely getting that intersection of animal, human. What about environmental in this area in particular that adds to it?
Well, I would say, that's probably for us, that's the part that we are least, I think, experts in. There are people who dedicate their lives to understanding environmental health. We live in Galveston, so we both live on the island. So, the health of the coast and of the fishing industry and of oil and gas and all of that is very important to us. And so I think for us, environment is a very important part. It's probably the part where we cover the least because we don't have the expertise, but where we're always looking for folks to interview, folks to help us understand those factors.
Yeah, and I think the common theme of these One Health problems that we like to talk about, and the research that we do, is that these problems are fairly complex. We call them wicked problems because they are so complex, and it takes a lot of different disciplines to address them. And so, yes, UTMB is an excellent medical school, but we also have to work with a lot of other schools. We work with Texas A&M in College Station, or in Galveston as well. So working with sectorial and with multidisciplinary is kind of like the key to solving those complex problems.
So I've always enjoyed talking to the UTMB folks. They always seem overly happy. It seems like it's a great place to work. So did you pitch this idea of a podcast to them and they were like, go for it? Or how did this come about?
Yeah, I think we found a group of people, and we were all very enthusiastic, and we decided, okay, yeah, let's do this, and then we talked to leadership, and there's been a lot of support.
Yeah. So Dennis is he is really great with ideas. Dennis is one of these guys who. Maybe every other week, Dennis will send me a text that, hey, did you see this article about this new educational technology? Or, hey, did you hear about this social media thing that everybody's doing to get information out about about coronavirus. I mean, during COVID, I mean, Dennis, as a virologist, so I was doing, inpatient, outpatient COVID care. So I was with patients, taking care of people with the virus constantly. And then, Dennis was on the lab side, and we were talking a lot about kind of what I was seeing on the human side, what he was seeing in the lab side, and there was this drive to try to understand, how we could engage better with the public. I mean, I think that's been a huge area certainly for science and medicine. It's this big deficiency. I think we've had it for a long time. We stay inside the ivory tower, and we don't necessarily all know how to communicate with the public. So, Dennis it seemed like every other week Dennis he'd say, hey, we should try this for this course. We should maybe put this thing out there. And then, he said, hey, I've been listening to a lot of podcasts, and a lot of people are getting their information this way, especially younger people. And people who have margins of time. They don't have, hours and hours to sit in a class, but they have 15, 20, 30 minutes on their ride to work, or while they're putting their makeup on. I'm speaking of my spouse who puts her makeup on and listens to podcasts, and we're consuming information in very different ways. And so I think, Dennis had come and said, I wonder if we should explore this idea of a podcast. And we did find some traction with our small team. Dr. Danielle Swetnam is another virologist, and she's part of the team. And then Connie Holabar, who's the director of communications for the Galveston National Lab. We kind of all had different expertise. We brought it all together. And we said, I think we really are very interested in this idea of translating these scientific advancements, scientific achievements, scientific questions to a broader population. So it's something we're still trying to figure out how to do.
Yeah, and I mean, there are estimates that say that probably 1/3 of all Americans listen to podcasts in one way or another, right? At work or at home or something like that, it's just a good way of reaching people. I think times are changing. Matt talked about like how we have to find new ways of communicating, of reaching people. We see this now a lot with like recruitments. When we recruit students, they always do the internet search. They look on social media to find news and to find good universities and so on. So I think that's the way to go, just to communicate through podcasts and through social media.
Well, I get the sense that it's important for UTMB to allow you the freedom to explore these different avenues, and really, like you said, try to bring in more transparency into science, medicine. So it sounds like you're doing this through the podcast, Infectious Science. Talk to us about the episodes you have so far and kind of what the plans are going forward. There's going to be a Lyme disease one. I'm almost certain.
We're going to do that one just for you. Yeah. Maybe we're going to have you on to share your story.
We're going to invite you.
The pure terror.
I like it. I'm with you. I really, especially, I don't know if you've seen a real close-up picture of a tick.
Oh, yeah.
They're beautiful and frightening, right? It's that mix of beauty and terror.
Yeah, and this was before WebMD, so I must have seen a 60-minute special or something, and it resonated, and I found a tick, and I'm like, oh, I'm dead. I've got Lyme disease. It's a foregone conclusion.
Well, they have to be on there a good long time, I think, right, Dennis?
That is true. Yes.
So tell us about your episodes. Tell us about what are some of the topics you want to cover.
Yeah, I think so far we've released 5 episodes. I think we're still early on. We're still trying to listen to our audience and find out what they want to hear, what kind of format they prefer in the podcast. So we've done episodes on the first episode is on scent dogs and how they can detect COVID in patients that are infected. We've done career highlights, so we want to show off some of the very awesome faculty that we have at UTMB. We've done a podcast with Texas A&M to introduce some of the work that they are doing. So a pretty broad range, and I think as we go on with the podcast, we want to see what people like and listen from our audience. So I don't know, Matt, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think we're really trying new things. I mean, I think we've tried sort of one-on-one interviews. There's been sort of more of a panel discussion. We've recently recorded but haven't released a paper discussion where, a small group of us are sitting and discussing a new paper that's showing us something interesting about an animal disease that could interfere or could interface with humans. And so I think we're really just trying different formats. I think one of the things that, at least for me, the types of podcasts that I find compelling are those that have, yes, there's some structure, but there's a little bit of banter, and there's a little bit of, we don't take it so seriously. We can laugh a little bit, and we can, make light of things a little bit. In a heavy world, sometimes you need a little bit of levity.
Yeah.
But I think we're still working on that. I think the episodes we have right now, we're very happy with. We're really happy with the sound production quality. Shout out to Corey Mark, who's our producer, who lives full time in Gaborone, Botswana, which is in southern Africa. We send him files, he sends us back gold, and so really he's just done a great job. But lives full time down in Botswana doing music production. So we're just real happy with it.
It sounds to me you're embracing the process, which that's the important part. Because when they asked me to do a podcast, I thought, oh yeah, this will last. And we're over 100 episodes in now, and I'm just like, okay, and it's rewarding. I mean, have you found that there's a reward there just personally?
Yeah, for me personally, I mean, I think it's there's a lot of pride. I think when it feels like it doesn't take a huge amount of work, but then when you look back, you say, okay, we did a lot of reading, did a lot of preparation, we had some good conversations, we reviewed the content. So there's actually quite a bit of work that goes into it. Yeah. So yeah, I think I agree with you. I think it has to be something you're proud of putting out.
Well, and it's made me a better listener because, in talking with people, we don't script this, contrary to what people might think. We do not script this. But it's just a conversation, and so I have to be able to listen and then go with the flow on where the topic is taking us. So today was kind of interesting because it's a podcast about podcasts, and I thought, okay, it's kind of like the who was that, the show about nothing type thing. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so it sounds like you guys have fully embraced the process and
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things that always makes me smile is everybody got so excited about it, and everybody does their thing. Matt composed with his son some of the music that we're using, so it's actually his own design.
Nice.
That he composed with his son. So I think that goes to show the commitment, and it's just an awesome process. It feels very rewarding to me. The rewarding feeling is very similar to what I feel when I teach people, where you see like you actually make a difference. And sometimes we get feedback, and somebody texts me or sends me an email and says, oh, I learned about like this cat coronavirus, or and this is if you make it, you're making a difference, and I think you're reaching people, and I think that's the rewarding part.
Yeah, and I think it's also putting out this idea that of this interconnectedness that we have not, certainly as a clinician, I know I can speak for many that are practicing medicine. We don't always think about, we practice them. We talk about the choices people make, smoking, alcohol consumption, dietary choices, but we don't often interface it with the animal world, food production cycles, where that food comes from, how it's produced, how it's whether antibiotics are used. I mean, a lot of stuff that we as clinicians, it just doesn't have immediate relevance. We have so much to stay on top of. It almost seems like that's too much, right? But to put something out there that for younger scientists, for younger folks that are interested in science, for clinicians or practitioners that may not know much about One Health or this approach, saying, oh, I never thought about how this disease being in animals could, and learning something about how it is in animals, how it behaves in animals, or how a disease makes animals behave could help us understand human health a little bit better, right? And I think some of the greatest innovations in human health history have come from what we learned from animals and plants, right? That's just how science evolves. So if we all kind of take that approach, and we can help people just start to see, not necessarily change everything they do, but see the world in a little bit more of a broad way. I think we break down our silos, and it helps us all at least helps us all strive for a better standard of health.
Well, and I can definitely tell that UTMB's committed to this One Health idea because of the various guests. We've covered so many different things, like you mentioned food and food production and how important it is what we put into our bodies. I'm sure on the animal side, there's a rumor going around on the internet now, and it's that nobody's chickens were laying eggs, right? And they were using this commercial feed, and then they switched to organic feed, and then all of a sudden they're laying eggs again. I don't know if it's true or not, but it's the type of thing that at least warrants looking into according to this kind of One Health kind of view.
Oh, absolutely. I think pre-pandemic, I think this was not on everybody's radar, but I think now, we all see the examples all the time, right? The prices of eggs has gone up so much, and this is because of avian influenza influencing, so again, another pathogen influencing our society, our culture, and this just keeps going. I think there's just one example after the next that we're all connected, and I don't think we can continue just being specialists and just focusing on one thing, because it's such a complex world that we live in.
And it keeps getting smaller and smaller, and so we're exposed to more and more of these things, aren't we?
Correct.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And I think if you're not seeing the One Health around you, then your eyes are closed, right? I mean, it's in everything that we do now, and to the extent, again, like I mentioned before, that we can help people destigmatize a little bit. I mean, we tend to think of these, they get sensationalized, these diseases like bird flu, and it's just these terrible, gnarly pictures of just, massacres of birds, and everybody gets real scared, right? And they get real scared, and I think people are really exhausted from being scared. I think COVID made everybody worried, and just everybody's kind of tired of being scared. And so I'm not saying that these things aren't things to worry about, but can H5N1 potentially, spread to humans someday, human to human? Who knows? Right now, it's not been really documented, right? But we know it's transmitting more among other mammals, and that's something to keep an eye on and prepare for. We know so much now, and we have such great technology, and we have such great scientific, expertise at our fingertips. But that information, when mixed and matched and presented in a way that is meant to instill fear, doesn't make it productive, right? It makes it so that then all people are doing is just, it's fear response, right? So I'm not saying that this podcast is the inoculation for that. I'm not saying that we're going to fix all of that, but we try to talk about issues in a way that is it's really about the science, and it's about understanding those interconnections, and that this is part of the world where we live in, that animal diseases are out there, and there's always potential they can come to humans. We're all interrelated. The environment plays a huge role. And if people understand that, I think when they see these really scary things, there's a little bit more of an understanding that, okay, well, let me just take a step back. Like, this is actually part of this process and this process. These things are all interrelated. So maybe those are really hard and very audacious goals, but I think we're really trying to do that.
It's funny because this discussion just reminded me, I can't give blood because I spent too many months as a child in Britain. And so they told me I can't do that because of mad cow disease. And I'm thinking, as we're talking here, that's the perfect example of this interrelated, because I ate some beef 30, 40 years ago in Britain.
Yeah.
I can't give blood.
Yeah, and I think this is a very good example, right? Like I was in vet school in Germany when mad cow disease was really, at its peak, and I think mad cow disease is just one of those really, really good examples. Did you know that the reason why the meat in Britain was contaminated is because the Brits made changes to the food production, and they wanted to save energy. And so they modified some of those processing things and made it less safe. And because they were trying to cut back on certain things and reduce energy and the money that they spend on this stuff, that's why we're now dealing with this, you know, 3 decades later. So I think discovering some of those drivers, and not always talking about the fear, right? But also like, why are certain things the way they are, and that they're all connected. I think that's kind of like the goals of the podcast.
Yeah. Well, it's been a great pleasure having you on, and good luck with the podcast. For everybody, just to remember, it's Infectious Science.org. And you can find it on all the major platforms.
All the major platforms. And thanks to you for giving us the opportunity to come.
Oh, my pleasure.
And talk to you, and you're giving us a lot of good ideas for the studio. You know, I like your layout, and I like the fact that you're using the video. It's really cool. So
awesome.
We're going to learn a lot from you guys as well.
Well, thanks for coming.
All right.